Hello and welcome to my newest raid guide for Pandaemonium, Anabaseios, the 11th Circle. Before we begin, we'll need three things. Number 1, your protein spread clock position. Number 2, your designated light parties. And number 3, your support DPS pairs. To begin, Themis will start off by casting Eunomia, which is a raid wide with a heavy bleed on top of it, so you want to use a few mits on it. Next, he'll quickly follow up with Dike, which is a swap tank buster that hits both tanks twice. Upon both tanks taking damage, when they swap, they'll take damage once more, so mitigate heavily. After the buster, Themis will cast a series of repeating attacks that have small variations of them throughout the fight. The first of these is Jury Overruling. For this mechanic, you'll want to spread to your clock positions. You'll either be glowing with a light effect or dark effect. The dark effect will spawn a large donut AoE under each player, as well as choose 4 players for a pair soak. The light effect will leave a circle AoE under each player and target healers for a light party stack. Let's talk about the dark version of Jury Overruling first. Everyone will move to their clock positions. Once the cast bar snapshots, what we did is have the supports rotate counterclockwise to stand on top of the DPS on the intercardinals. That way, they are both standing securely within the donuts and resolve the pair AoE. And for the light version of Jury Overruling, everyone will once again go to their clock positions, except this time, AoEs will now be baited under every player, so you quickly collapse in on west and east to soak your light party stacks. Next, we're going to talk about Upheld Overruling, which will come after the protein mechanic. This mechanic can also be light or dark. A player will be tethered at random, either on a tank or a non-tank. If a tank is tethered, Themis will glow purple. The tank will stand in the center of the arena and soak an enormous tank buster. Everyone needs to make sure they are very far out. Once the tank buster is done, everyone needs to collapse back in because a giant donut AoE will hit the arena. And while you're inside his hitbox, there will be another pair mechanic to resolve. The light version of Upheld is when a random player that is not a tank is tethered. In this case, every single player is going to want to collapse into the very middle of the arena for a stack damage. As soon as everyone takes damage, the light parties you agreed upon earlier will then move to west and east, and wait there to take their soak, as there will be an enormous circle AoE that spreads outward. Okay, next is Divisive Overruling. Divisive Overruling is a giant rectangular AoE that is based upon wherever Themis is facing. Like the last two mechanics, this can also be light or dark. If Divisive Overruling is dark, it will be an in pattern immediately after the AoE with your pairs once more. The other variant is if it is light. After the rectangular AoE goes off, it will then expand, going even further out, meaning that your party should stand on east and west respectively once more, and soak the light party stacks that inevitably come afterward. Immediately after Divisive Overruling is concluded, a giant stack marker will appear on a player that will hit several times, called Styx. You should dump many mitigations on this, as it hurts far more than a standard raid-wide. Next up, we have Arcane Revelation. Again, the boss will either be light or dark in this case. Several light and dark mirrors will appear around the arena. The solve for this is you want to look for the 2 mirrors next to each other of the opposite element that he attuned to. In the case that Themis is glowing light, you'll be looking for 2 adjacent dark mirrors. The safe spot will be directly in front of them for one light party, while the other light party will be directly across the arena but still in line with said mirrors. Once your 2 light parties are in position in front of the safe mirrors, Themis will once again use a new ability called Dismissal Overruling, as well as picking between dark and light. No matter if it's dark and light or not, he will knock all players back, as the mirrors will resolve. As long as you're in front of the correct mirrors, you'll be knocked into safety from dismissal. If the boss was dark, you will have to immediately resolve your pairs on the inside of the hitbox, because there is a giant donut AoE that follows up. Or conversely, if the boss was light when using dismissal, you will immediately resolve the light party stacks once more on the outside of the hitbox. After about 20 seconds of auto attacks, Themis will finally use Shadowed Messengers. Shadowed Messengers is going to summon 2 clones on the inner cardinals. One of them will be glowing light, and one of them will be glowing dark. Both of them are going to be using the same ability that we discussed earlier in the guide, called Divisive Overruling, meaning that 2 enormous rectangle AoEs will strike an X through the arena, as well as the follow-up mechanics that go with each. The light rectangle will grow in size, while the purple rectangle will force you to walk inside of it. First, we have to locate the safe spot. To do so, once you have the 2 clones in visual, you will go between them for the first safe spot, and the other light party will go directly across from them on the other side of the arena. So, you will either end up on A and Charlie, or B and Delta. Now, once you're in the safe spot, your next objective is to locate the dark clone. Once both of the Divisive Overrulings snapshot, you'll want to move to the side into where the dark clone was hitting. I'm going to include a very small but important detail about how the floor geometry is your best friend when doing this dodge. There's a little symbol on the floor that is the perfect thing to hide behind when doing this dodge. Next, as this resolves, Themis himself will use his own Divisive Overruling, prompting you to immediately resolve his own attack that you've seen before. Once Divisive Overruling is concluded, there will be 2 tethers that go out in your party. The first is going to be a tank tether that's purple. Whoever gets it should run straight to the purple clone and soak the giant circle tank buster on the wall. Whoever gets the light tether should stack in the center of the arena, but making a note to lean a little bit away from where the purple clone is. As soon as the party gets hit by their stack, they'll need to immediately run into where the purple tank was. There will be both an AoE as a result of the stack AoE in the middle, as well as an in mechanic wherever the purple tank buster was. After this is all resolved, you will finally do the protean mechanic that comes next from earlier in the fight, called Jury Overruling. Once the proteans are resolved, as well as the follow-up light or dark mechanic, he will then use Styx once more. Mitigate this appropriately because it's the hardest hitting raid-wide in the fight. After a while, a new mechanic will surface called Lightstream. Lightstream will summon 3 orbs around the arena. They will either have red arrows or blue arrows. There's a few different ways of solving this, but we can break it down real quick. To solve Lightstream, first we need to recognize that there are 6 potential safe spots, or slices. One thing you want to recognize is that there are 2 patterns. There's either going to be 2 orange sets of arrows and 1 set of blue arrows, or 2 sets of blue arrows and 1 set of orange arrows. First things first, move between the 2 slices between the colors. So you find the blue arrows, you find the orange arrows, you go between them. Now, only one of these slices is going to be safe. To determine which is safe, you want to lean on the side that has the higher number of arrows. So, you'll have, if you have 2 blue arrows, you lean in the slice that's closer to the blue arrow. And if there's 2 orange arrows, you'll lean on the slice that has 2 oranges. Once you've locked in your choice of where to hide, you want to stand still for about 7 or 8 seconds and let things resolve. At the same time, Themis is going to cast Divisive Overruling, but to be honest, you're not in a big rush to get out of the way. Light Party 1 will then curl around to the left and resolve the light or dark mechanic, while Party 2 will curl around the right side and resolve the light or dark mechanic. Once Divisive Ruling is done, Themis will then use another Eunomia raid-wide. Don't forget about the 15-second bleed. Next up, another Upheld Overruling, the same tether mechanic as before, just pay attention to if it is light or dark and resolve accordingly. Okay, so next up we have Dark and Light. 2 debuffs are going to assign to everybody, either a Light's Accord or Dark's Accord. People are going to be tethered together, with a DPS always tethered to a support. Start by looking at your debuff, and then your tethered partner's debuff. If you have the same debuff, you will be long tethers, required to stay apart for the duration of this mechanic. If you are tethered to someone with the opposite color as you are short tethers, kind of like a magnet mechanic. You're required to stay close to them through the entire mechanic. We assign the long tank to A and short tank to D. The long healer goes to C, and the short healer goes to B. The DPS then adjust to their support partner either by moving across from them to the 3 and 1 markers if far, or next to them on 2 and 4 if they are close. It's worth mentioning that the way markers are set up the way they are to make this mechanic easier. Next, Themis will use Arcane Revelation, which will summon orbs across the arena. While casting, he will glow either light or dark, signifying which orbs you cannot stand near when doing this. Once everyone goes back to their clock positions, he will use another Jury clock position mechanic. The color of this one is much different than the ones you've experienced. If he glows light, AoEs will be baited where everyone is standing. And it's important to note that any of the far players should step back when this goes off, to bait their AoEs safely on the wall, and then step forward to soak their light party stacks. The close players need to rotate counterclockwise for this version of the mechanic, to make sure that they resolve it correctly. In the event Jury's Overruling was purple or dark, the far tethers would stay still, and then quickly move on to the DPS who was standing on the intercardinal, to resolve the pair mechanic. The players on the close tethers, once taking their baits, would run out to soak their pair mechanic. I've included some point of views of this because this can be a little tricky. The boss will then use Divisive Ruling after Jury Overruling once more. In the event he glows light, the safe spots will be east and west, and if he glows purple, then players need to make sure to maintain their distance if they are far and stay with their partners if they're close, and do the pair mechanic respectively. Once Divisive Overruling has resolved, make sure that every single player does not move. This includes far tethers and close tethers until Emissary's Will resolves. With Dark and Light now concluding, Themis is then going to use Styx for a third time. Mitigate very heavily here. Once your team is done soaking Styx, he will use the Dike Tank Buster once again, which is a dual tank buster that must be swapped. And finally, moving into a new mechanic called Dark Current. For Dark Current, we like to have priority across the arena in light parties. For Group 1, we put them west or south, and Group 2, we put north or east. All that's going to happen is AoEs are going to either spread horizontally across the arena or vertically across the arena. A line in the floor is then going to trace along and show you which direction these AoEs are going to rotate. We have our melees on the inner portion of the safe spot, with the ranged on the outer portion of the safe spot. 4 players will then just rotate around with the AoEs on each side of the map. At the same time, a spread AoE is going to hit everybody, so don't be too close. This AoE can either rotate clockwise or counterclockwise. Once it's done, he will then use Jury Overruling once more, prompting everyone to run to their spread positions and resolve it as either light or dark. After Jury's Overruling, Upheld Overruling will then come in again as another repeating mechanic, picking a random tank or player for a tether. Resolve dark or light as necessary once more. As once this is completed, we will have yet another repeating mechanic in the form of Divisive Overruling. Check if it's light or dark, and solve this one too. Next up, a Eunomia raid-wide will come out, dealing a massive 15-second bleed, so make sure you have your mitts for that. The final main mechanic of the fight will now begin, called Letter of the Law. To resolve this, we have everyone except the tanks go to the 1 marker. The 2 tanks will go directly opposite of them. Themis will then cast 2-fold Revelation while picking either light or dark. You will move to the orb that is opposite of whatever element he picked. Once your party has moved to the safe orb, you'll then notice that the mirrors have once again surfaced on the corner of the arena. Based on whichever element he chose, you'll again want to stand in front of the opposite colored mirrors. This will always be immediately to the left or right of whatever safe orb you picked. The tanks will be doing the same thing on the other side of the arena. As this is happening, a player will be chosen at random for a stack tether, while one of the tanks will also randomly be chosen for the purple tether. To resolve this, we have the party stay still wherever they resolved the orb, and the tank that did not get tethered will quickly go rejoin them so that way he can help them with the stack. The tank with the tether will stand middle this time. Both of the tethers will resolve, and the party will slide into wherever the tank was, which should be in the center. Once your team collapses into the center, where the tank was soaking his buster, 4 towers are going to appear. They will either be on cardinals or intercardinals. We made a color-coded priority system. The same purple pairs that you've been using for the entire fight can pick a color marker and just soak that tower every pull. Since I was always a blue marker, I would just go to the blue tower every time. Once the towers are resolved, an untelegraphed version of Shadowed Messengers is going to happen once more. 2 clones will appear on intercardinals and cleave through the arena with Dismissive Overruling. Move to the safe spot between the 2 clones, and across from the clones, like before, and we're going to dodge into the purple clone, just like before. Only this time, Themis himself is going to be using Dismissive Overruling, meaning that we need to ride the knockback again and then resolve either the dark or light version of the mechanic that happens right after. At this point in the encounter, everything is a repeat. The first repeat mechanic will be another use of Styx, which you want to mitigate heavily. Once Styx is all healed up, a second cast of Lightstream will occur, spawning 3 spinners around the arena, and is resolved the exact same way as before. Immediately after the spinners are resolved, another Divisive Overruling will happen, which is then followed by a Dike tank buster. A final cast of Jury will then happen, making everyone go to their clock positions and resolving the light or dark mechanic that follows. Until finally, the party will collapse back in and see one more cast of Eunomia. Use every last bit of mitt and healing you have, as this is the final damage in the fight. And lastly, ultimate verdict is the Hard Enrage. I also wanted to give a heartfelt thank you for everybody watching. I really do appreciate it, and I hope that this video was helpful for you. Do feel free to drop a like and subscribe if you'd like, as we've got the P12 guide coming up next. And I do stream full-time on Twitch as well at twitch.tv/AhriEffect. So, that's all I have for you guys. You have a wonderful day. Later.